Welcome back. I will now introduce the next speaker, Paola Antonelli, who's the head curator of MoMA. Personally, I met Paola a long time ago, 2005, 6, 7, where we were judging the Index Award. I never met Paola before, and she was late, and I found out that Paola is always coming or leaving. She's working so hard that, she's always on the move. So you have to catch her in the right moments of time to get things. She came to Copenhagen the first time, and I remember we had a huge discussion about a war. And I found out that I was losing. So I thought, oh, what do you do? So I just moved and said, she's right. And from that day, I always said you were right. I've been a fantastic fan of your exhibitions, your displays. And the last time I was here last year, I went to see Talk to Me. And it's the first time, I was actually laughing leaving a museum. I thought it was so cool because I thought it had, everything in me. And it was just a week after I got my new job. So it actually also changed the whole way I'm seeing the center, the Danish Design Center on. Because, you have to come happy and you have to leave happy. And you have to leave so you get interested in things. And I think you are capable of doing that all the time. So let's hear how you review Danish design. I know you're not afraid of telling what you think is the problem. Thank you, Paola.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. And actually, I'm not going to let you off the hook because we'll review it together. I'm going to frame Danish design today, and then we'll do it together. But it's really interesting because watching Nile's presentation before, I recognized that even though I'm not Danish, and even though I am just making elations and deductions about Danish design, it's kind of true that there's this burden on the shoulders of contemporary Danish designers that comes from the 1950s. There are different moments in history, especially in the 20th century, when different nations in Europe especially, but also in the United States, were always so Western-centric. Things are changing right now, but there are different nations that really become the representative of the most advanced moment in design, at different moments, like the Netherlands in the 1920s, and before that it was Austria, and so on and so forth. You can say Italy in the 1960s. But the 1950s belong to Denmark and Finland, but that's between parentheses, to what was once upon a time called, in very ignorant way, Scandinavia. And this kind of stereotypical idea of Danish design is at the same time what has made Danish design so dear to MoMA, and also what is driving designers and Nile and the CEO of the Danish Design Center crazy today. Today, in this presentation and in our conversations, we'll stay close to the stereotype because we will be talking mostly about 3D design. But we'll see also how much that has changed since the 1950s, how dirty it has become. The problem and the beauty of Danish design of the 1950s was this cleanliness, purity, this idea of universality and timelessness that was also one of the ideals of the Museum of Modern Art. And it's what designers have been trying to get rid of and to try to transform into something that is instead attached to the earth. I'll read to you a quote from an exhibition in 1954. It was called Design in Scandinavia. Once again, everybody together, Scandinavia. And it was at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond. And it was the curator, Leslie Cheek, Jr. Every human is interested in objects for his home. He wants them to be as efficient and pleasing as possible, for he must use them daily throughout his life. In the world today, there is no group of people who have designed better objects for the home than the Scandinavians. So, how many positive and negative stereotypes do we notice in this particular quote? The positive stereotypes trying to make everybody's life better, trying to make it happen at home, trying to really devote the responsibility of a designer to improving quality of life. The negatives, apart from the pronoun he throughout, thinking only of the home, as if the space where we really perform our life is the home and not the social sphere, not the outside world. And also this idea of grouping Scandinavia together. Slowly but surely, things have changed. But one thing that at that time really grouped most of Scandinavia together was this idea of improving people's life. The expression then was completely different, and Denmark was particularly stellar, together with Finland, in the way it really reached people. And this desire to improve people's lives by any means possible is what is happening also today. But let's take a look at the forms of the stereotypes. And I'm not going to go through all of this, so I have to decide which pronunciation to use. I'm going to use the American one because I can't stand people that are not of one particular language stressing the pronunciation of that language. So it's Hans Wegner. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to be talking about Hans Wegner. But because Nile has already shown you some. But I wanted to just give you these slides. These slides that show you the stereotype and the icon. So Jacobsen, considered a furniture designer and instead one of the most innovative architects and system designers in Europe in the 1920s. This set of chairs, iconic because of their distinguished shape, because of their versatility, because of the fact that they were copied even by those who took the picture of Christine Keeler in hundreds and thousands of ways. But instead, the positive stereotype is the innovation. Danish companies in the 1950s started using plywood as opposed to massive wood and really developed the way to use plywood in a more efficient way. They were already thinking economically. And the steel basis of all these chairs was a way to make the whole shape and also the chair itself lighter and in most cases also, pileable. So it was really a different approach to design, and an approach that came in a way from architecture. A little parenthesis. Once upon a time in Europe, in order to become a designer, you had to study architecture, which is an interesting feat that also makes for a lot of technical savviness and engineering that went into all the work that is then condensed. So every chair was a distillation of an architectural approach that took into account really the means at disposal. So it was a departure that was first and foremost rational and technology and engineering based, and then became like a firework, more artistic. So I would like you to take that into consideration. Another great icon of Danish design is, of course, Poulsen and Henningsen. So it's all these different lamps that really are both examples of amazing sculptural agility, but also of good use of metals, and also of the identity of the low lumen kind of Danish lighting. But as compelling as these icons are, they have remained really the image of Denmark to this day. And that's the problem that I also have with Italian design. I'm Italian. Italians became really prominent in the world of design in the 1960s, and they had much more flamboyant and different forms, a little bit more like, the Panton chairs that you've seen. But to this day, Italians are not able to get rid and to move on beyond that particular stereotype and stigma. And I have to say that Danes have been much more successful at it. I wanted also to show you something about the relationship between the Museum of Modern Art and Danish design. It goes back a long time. And as the consul before also reminded us, it blossomed again in a very brilliant way in 2004 when we reopened the museum. And I can tell you that the Danish consul at the time, in the late 1990s, had this idea to help the Museum of Modern Art refurbish or furbish the whole museum for the new building in 2004, using all furniture, all cutlery for the restaurant, everything Danish. And they organized everything for us. I went together with Danny Meyer, who was going to run the restaurant at MoMA. We went to Copenhagen and we spent like 2 days watching all sorts of cutlery and furniture. And then we consolidated all the orders, and the whole of MoMA represented Danish design. So we were talking about great product placement once again, but also it was fabulous for us. But in the MoMA collection, there's a lot of Danish design that matches the stereotype. Bang & Olufsen, everything perfect, lots of Jacobsen, Wegner, and Henningsen, and then, some Henning Andreasen, these beautiful phones, of course, we have Lego, and right now Lego was celebrated again in the exhibition center of the Child that had also a lot of other Danish examples, more Andreasen with the 6 Folle 26 stapler. So there's a lot of classic Danish design. But I have to say that I'm happy to have been able to add also some less conventional, more contemporary, and less stereotypical Danish design. So I would like to say that the continuity that is present in Danish design today is a continuity that is more philosophical than formal. Of course, there's still plywood, there's still simplicity and purity. You see here the work of Cecily Mann's, her Mikado table, which is the first table that I ever saw of her, and more of the Caravaggio light and the wicker baskets. So there are still designers that really follow in that continuity and in that purity, to the point that those stackable vase sets might have been designed in the 1950s. So there is still this legacy that continues unabated and renovated every year in the work of contemporary designers. Just like there is also the tradition that comes with making really great furniture that you can buy and distribute everywhere, even today. Gubi, this company, is the company that made most of the chairs that you will find at MoMA. If you go to Café 2 at MoMA, they're still there. And the gorgeous aspect is that they age beautifully. We chose a particular leather that gets better every year. And then the chair breaks and the seat comes off the steel, and you put a screw in and you let the screw be visible, which should not happen, and still it looks good. So what I love is that most Scandinavian, most Danish design, terrible, really. Most Danish design ages really, really, really well. And you see, Gubi is a young company. I think it's been around for 10 years, Nille? Yeah, no more than 10 years, but it seems like it's been there forever. It just fits perfectly within the scope and within the discourse, if we want to call it the way, of Danish design. Hey Welling is done this stackable chair and bar stools, and you see how seamless they also are. I mean, they might remind you of the spaghetti chairs that were designed in Italy in the 1930s, but you know what? They're much more comfortable, typical. When you compare Italian design with Danish design, that's what you're going to say. Oh yeah, that looks great, but, so it's really quite great to see designers that continue in that tradition. But then there are designers that depart from that tradition completely. I love the work of Luis Campbell, and actually, there are these two pieces, this great very round chair and the Prince chair, that are part of the MoMA collection. And Louise, you could say that she uses advanced technology, but in truth, it's not super advanced. It's laser cutting and forming metal. This chair is made of steel. It's like a lace of steel that is first two-dimensional, so you have the sheet steel and you cut it, and then you open it up so it becomes three-dimensional. It's a gorgeous chair that has a presence of its own. It's also quite comfortable, and it's really gorgeous use of technology. And similar thing with the Prince chair that is actually laser cut foam, so it also ends up being extremely comfortable. So you see how the work moves away from it, and even looking at all the housewares that were celebrated by that curator in 1954, we see that that tradition has remained, but it has evolved with completely different materials, and also used materials before, old materials like steel. So you see here, Ole Jensen, we have, for instance, this dishwash basin. It's over at MoMA pretty much everywhere in the cafes, which is quite beautiful, and several other pieces by him. But you see how it goes beyond, and we're starting here to see the getting your hands dirty. You wouldn't probably have seen something like this in the past, this kind of deformation and mutation. A hot water bottle would have been probably very classic if designed in the 1950s. And instead, today, it starts taking many new directions. And similarly, this idea of having all of these different mattresses that can be stacked and put in a corner of the room would have probably been the same in the 1950s, but not necessarily made with bamboo. So an environmental sensibility and an openness to materials from the rest of the world is one of the characteristics of contemporary design. Industrial design is, of course, still very, very lively in Denmark. And this is the tradition of the Bang & Olufsen of the past. but once again, it has become more global and more adaptable. Bang & Olufsen's success is in a way due to the purity and the absolute stylishness of its shapes, even though recently it's become a little gimmicky in its attempt to retain that kind of elegance. And instead, the work of, for instance, a young company like Kibisi is much more style-less. There's not one leitmotif. You can't see an object and say, ooh, that's Kibisi. And Kibisi actually is a nice alliance of architect Bjarke Ingels that Nille first showed, and then Jens Martin Skibsted, who is a design thinker and a designer and an entrepreneur. He's the one that had started the Biomega by company years ago. And I don't remember who the third is. Lars Larsen. Well, and he's a designer too, right? But, you know, Bjarke is quite an amazing individual and an architect. And Jens Martin is a philosopher beyond being a product designer. And the company itself has this philosophy that is episodic. So it's about doing the best that you can with the brief at your disposal every single time and not try to repeat themselves or the object. So these are other objects that they've done, and you see how they range from real, you know, contract furniture and industrial design to instead small details like those hang around and toss around utensils made of wood that are meant to be adaptable to all the different parts of the house. What I find really interesting about Danish design in more recent years is that this savviness and this desire to make the world better has been adapted in many occasions for humanitarian purposes or for emergency and really practical, difficult situations. Nille showed you before Vestergaard Franzen that now has become sadly Swiss. I discovered just a few days ago.
We have a tax problem.
Huh?
We have a tax problem.
Oh yeah, a tax problem. Yeah, I know, they have a tax problem, says Nille, it's true. But Vestergaard Franzen was like a really glowing example of this kind of humanitarian entrepreneurship. But I want to show you here the work of a group of students from Design School in Kolding that together with the Royal Danish Academy of Design, School of Design and the Academy of the Arts is possibly one of the best design schools in Denmark. This is a beautiful life-saving boat. It's like a life-saving equipment, an inflatable raft that is designed in such a way, you see this lip over here, in such a way that even in stormy waters, if you are in the water and you want to get onto the raft, it's easier for you than if the raft were all equally high. So there's a lot of thought that goes, of course, there's all sorts of equipment and design inside, but this is the detail that is particularly special and very human-centered. And this raft is right now on display at MoMA. It's going to stay up until January. So if you're interested, you can see it on the 3rd floor. You can also see it from the garden. It's so big. Other examples, this beautiful work by Han Pham, the yellow tone needle cap. It's very simply, it's an object, it's a cap made of plastic, simply, that is meant to be adapted to any kind of aluminum cans. And it's a way to make sure that needles don't get recycled and reused, for instance, in different parts of Africa that are ravaged by HIV/AIDS. So a very simple object, very inexpensive, easy to produce, and adaptive, something that can really become a solution for a big problem. I am also a great fan of the company Compede that has been, bought a few years ago by Johnson & Johnson, but they are the ones, I don't know if any of you has ever tried those blister Band-Aids that are amazing. They're like slugs, and you put them on your blister, and you leave them for days, and then something happened, remember The Green Mile, the movie where the evil would go from one person to the other through the mouth? So when you peel it off, your skin is perfect, and instead the Band-Aid is all strangely ravaged, so it has sucked the blister away. Sorry, I see many things in objects that other people don't. It might look a little lyrical or exaggerated, but I find Compete one of the most beautiful, the blister Band-Aid, and in fact, it's in the MoMA collection, just so you know. Nille spoke to you about Index, and Index is indeed the culmination of this sensibility that is at the same time old and new, that is about Danish design. Index is not only about Danish design. Of course, you see the work here, the beautiful incubator that we're going to hear about. It's not an incubator. It's actually a huggable pillow blanket for infants that are born too early. But here are other examples, non-Danish examples, like this bicycle helmet is actually Swedish, and it got the award, I think, last year. It's an instant bicycle helmet, so it's inside your neck, and then when you hit the ground from your bike, it just inflates. So it's almost like an airbag for your hair. This is instead a solar oven that is meant to distill water and to make water drinkable. This is the wonderful Mein Kafon. This comes from the Netherlands, but it's an Afghani designer that designed this dandelion-like gigantic object that rolls into minefields powered by the wind and explodes landmines when it encounters them, also just acquired at MoMA. So, and then here is a tool for menstrual hygiene for girls in Africa so that they can go to school, because so many women and girls stay home during their period because they don't have the necessary equipment to be able to go and walk distances, and it's really an impediment to real development and progress amongst women in most of Africa. Here is the work instead of Elemental in Chile. It's a series of basic dwellings. Chile has a system that's not very different, I understand now, from the Danish system. So the state gives you a once-in-a-lifetime subsidy to buy your own home. And you need to put a little bit of the money, but the rest is given to you by the state. And Elemental has designed this basic, like blank canvas, but they are homes that you can add on to. You can add a lodge, you can add a balcony, and it's a cul-de-sac, you make a whole community. So it's the basic seeding of a community. And here is an example of how Index, a few years ago, does it still do it with the balls?
No, it's a different.
It's a different layout now, but in the first years, the display of the objects that had won the really big awards and also some runners-up was in these translucent balls that then were sent pretty much all over the States. All over the world. It's everywhere. So you see this kind of philosophy, a design that is really rooted into the real world, that deals with real problems, is where Denmark is going, where MoMA is going, where Parsons and the New School is going. Everybody's going in that direction. Why? Because it's become urgent. So what does it mean to still see some furniture and some objects? It means that design still needs its stereotypical and its ancestral types of objects, typologies of objects, because that's where you kind of develop your chops as a designer, and then you can move on. I didn't want to get there too. But what I find really interesting is that Denmark is also one of the places where design is understood as a political engine and as a real way to think about social, not engineering, social design. Social engineering sounds really mean and evil. Instead, social design is good. It's about, once again, making everybody feel better. I think that such institution as the Danish Design Center and the Danish Consulate giving so much power and so much attention to design really are a testament to how governments should deal with design. You know, there are some governments that know how to use design, how to really support design, and how to understand that design is a force for the futures and for the future, and others don't. Denmark is an example of, okay, it's got its problems, we know, but it's an example of real commitment. And so are the Netherlands, even though lately it's been a little iffy and some cuts have been made. Korea is another example, and few others. Bad examples, Italy, the United States. France, not so much, but most of the world does not understand that design is a way for a nation to build a future, to really cement a past, and to build a bridge with other communities. And I think that what we can learn from Danish design today is not only elegance, good use of materials, dedication to social issues, but it's really the political power of design. And I can't wait to see the speakers today and the designers really address this issue, which is how design can get its hands dirty and can really become part of the world. Thank you very much. And now we're going to use the rest of the time for one of our famous fights. It's it's not true. We didn't fight. It's just that I tend to be really.
No, because you were not listening.
No, I tend to be really bossy and competitive in juries. I'm sorry. It's true.
That's okay. I mean, we had about 1,000 entries, and we have to cut them down to 5 in 2 days. So we need that. Paola, when you see young design today, or young designers in Denmark today, how do you see them in? Because you travel all the time, and how do you see them into that context? Are they still very local, or how do you feel that?
Not at all, and then yes. Like for instance, when I go to visit Louise and when I go to visit Cecily, their offices are so comfortable and so nested into older buildings and so much at the scale of an old European city that it looks like they would stay there forever and not go anywhere. But in truth, all designers are moving pretty much as I am. There are so many design meetings all over the world. There's so much requests for different people and different designers to give their viewpoint that I see them really as having a global perspective. That said, there's no way not to represent the place where you grew up. There's no way to get rid of the kind of education that you got, so it better be good. And there's no way not to be proud as a designer to have been educated and to have eaten many meals in Denmark. So I feel that the perspective is global. I feel that there's no, once again, stylistic approach. It's not all about plywood. It's not all about minimalism and purity. But it is about the Hippocratic oath that comes with being a designer in Denmark.
But you also talked about that you have to get your hands dirty, and sometimes when I see I compare Danish design to Dutch design because they've been fantastic, popular over the last years. When you see what is it that distinguishes the Dutch designers at the moment? Is that because I hear that it's too conceptual. That's the excuse in Denmark.
No, I think Dutch design right now is so much better. I can say it because I told them to. I think that Dutch designers used to be spoiled brats. It was not about being conceptual. It was about having it too easy. You know what I'm saying? Because it was really this idea that as a designer you were like a cherished individual, and the state would take care of your schooling, and then when you became a professional, the state would buy some of your first products, no questions asked, so that you would have a subsidy, maybe also give you some help for the rent. That made for, in my opinion, an excessively artistic type of design. And I make this distinction because I love conceptual design, but I don't think that was the case, because I think that for many years, Droog Design tried to teach a lesson to the world, but the world couldn't believe it because the milk bottle lamps were not recycled, they were new bottles, because the ponytail of light bulbs costed more than $1,000. So there was a disconnect. I think that Danish design, as we say in Italy, speaks like it eats. I mean, it's very straightforward, and what you see is what you get. That said, I feel that recently, places like the Design Academy in Eindhoven are producing really interesting designs that are politically involved, very strong, and that can be compared to the work of certain schools in Denmark. If anything, Denmark sometimes is too pragmatic and doesn't take to Denmark. I'm generalizing so much, but the panorama of the design schools is that sometimes they are very realistic, maybe even too much. They could use a dose of experimentation and conceptualism.
Because when we see some of the young designers that we'll see later today, some of their designs is very social. It could be very difficult to explain to people why is this design. So we have Thea's with the baby, we have Anna who's working with the doctors, So, so is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a necessary thing.
Okay.
It's where design is going, and it's our job to explain it to people. I encounter it every day. It's very complicated, but it's something we have to go through, and we have to really really hone our skills, our communication skills, in order to explain what we're doing. When it comes to Thea's work, when you see the Nestle, which is the name of that object, there is also an aesthetic and elegant quality to it that shouldn't be necessary, but it's a plus. I believe that form and aesthetic is a way to communicate. And sometimes when you deal with people that do not understand that design can be interfaces, interaction systems, services, some kind of formal reference, better if elegant, helps. So it's really about finding the point of communication. Anne might have a harder time, but by talking, by diagramming, by explaining the fact that you start with some goals and you use the means at your disposal, we might get there. I just hope we will not get to use definitions, because those never work.
Oh, I hope that my grandchildren don't know what design is, because it should just be a part of your daily life, right? But when I also I visited Japan for a lot of years, and I was really scared when I came back, because it was a lot about me. It was me, 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 me. Then they had a tsunami, and I think things changed dramatically. I can hear that Sandy here has done, it's been tough, but it's also changed a mindset. Do you see that I can see that some of the Danish designers are a little bit in front of thinking about, a bigger perspective than your own life? Is that what's coming here, or do we all need a wake-up call to get design going fast enough to secure our future?
Well, I don't know if you're talking about altruism or if you're talking about bigger problems. When it comes, New York is a special place, because we've had other moments that made us feel like a community, like after 9/11. New Yorkers tend to be individuals and then a group, a really tight-knit group. And it's like Italians, we can always fight each other and be individualistic, but then the moment you insult Italy or insult New York, everybody together. Or you hurt New York. I believe that there's very few places, design places in the world, that do not acknowledge that, you were saying that we still have a window of opportunity. I think we're already in dire straits, personally. And I believe that there's no design place in the world that does not acknowledge that. So designers already feel the urgency. Some might choose because, hey, says who, that we should all work on a system to save the world from tsunami or to change environmental problems. Some decide to work on chairs, and it's perfectly fine. But I think that also those that decide to work on chairs are still designers, and therefore really connected to the problems in the world. I might be doing wishful thinking, but I always think that the difference between an artist and a designer is that an artist can choose whether to be connected with the world and responsible towards other human beings or not. He or she can choose. A designer has to be by definition. So that kind of connection doesn't go away. Look at Ingo Maurer. He does the most poetic pieces. There's no apparent involvement in the world, but he will tell you everything that's going on. He's been resisting the demise of the light bulb because of aesthetic reasons, but at the same time, he's embraced LEDs because he knows that that's the future. So we're talking about a poet, somebody who does the most lyrical and gorgeous lighting fixtures in the world that seem like they're not going to do anything to solve the problems of overpopulations, but still he thinks, so designers are like that.
But yeah, and you're also talking about design as a instrument for politics, right? Yeah. And when I see the young designers we have here, they're widespread, but they all fit into a politic that can move the world forward. Of course, we have a quite good government who would like to make a design policy. We have one. We're starting a new policy for design and architecture, and I think but I also see that sometimes too much nursing, as you said with the Dutch, there's too much nursing from the government. You were maybe getting lazy because you didn't need to do things. So I see that sometimes with this policy, yes, we can change something, but but isn't it that we needed an integrated policy where design is not there? You know, do we need a design policy in the United States like we have?
We will get there. It's very, very hard to make people take design seriously. Like, for instance, Matilda McQuaid is here from Cooper Hewitt, and Cooper Hewitt runs the National Design Awards. And it does a beautiful job, and the connection is with the White House, but it's the East Wing, it's not the West Wing. Design should be in the West Wing. Science is there maybe a little bit, but it already has its problem. It depends on the president. So design, science, art, all of those disciplines and fields of studies that are not directly connected to immediately pragmatic indexes of, you know, economical wealth or economical well-being, or balance or military action and so on and so forth, tend to be left to the side. And instead, they should become really part of the discussion and part of the decision making. So some of us have this ambition. I mean, for instance, John Maida, who's the president of RISD, has taken the so-called STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education, that is at the basis of the idea of progress of so many nations in the world, and transformed it into STEAM, adding the A for art. Or Adam Bly, who founded Seed Magazine and Seed Media, that's trying to promote this idea of scientific thinking by getting to the people that work with the president, you know, direct advisors. Me, I always have to write the tales of something else. Design has not, you know, they still think of us as cute, expensive chairs. So it's going to take a while, educating. But what I try to do is to write the coattails of science. Usually, personally, that's my way, or technology, or I try to, as you were saying before, try to find some metrics so that I can infiltrate. Was it you? I think it was the consul. But find metrics that measure culture in the whole equation of progress. But it's tough. It's a long ways to go.
But do you think, because you can say as being a Danish designer, sometimes there's a lot of nice talking from governments, but they could do a lot more. But I also think that sometimes if they don't do it, you fight more, right?
Well, it always has to be beneficial for both sides. So it's not about designers being nursed and cuddled. It's about designers doing something that improves the national standing, whether it's just soft power or whether it's hard power, and therefore it's like really economic indexes and more jobs and so on and so forth. So I think it is all a matter of language and communication. I think that the state or the government could do more, but I think that the more should not be given in the form of subsidies. It should be given in the form of incentives, and then it should be an investment, and designers would have to give back. So I don't know. When I say language, there's a kindness in Denmark that maybe is what you're talking about. Maybe it's not clear. Maybe you just have to be a little rougher. But I think it's really important for the government to recognize the importance of design.
So talking about roughness, because I see New York is the city with an attitude. I mean, it's got a fantastic attitude. You can survive or you can. How do you see the young designers we brought here? Will they survive New York, or is it too tough, or how do you actually?
No, not at all. Well, as an Italian, when I moved here, I was going to cry in the bathroom for 3 months. I started at MoMA, and I found the place so cold. I found my colleagues, sorry Matilda, not you, so cold, etc. I was going literally to cry in the bathroom almost every day. But after 2 years, it took me a while. I find this the warmest and most humane city that I know. I'm from Milan, and I was going into stores in Milan, in the centers of Milan, and already 2 or 3 times the store clerks were addressing me in English. And after the 4th time, I'm like, what's going on? And so I asked her, why are you talking to me in English? And I asked her in Italian. And she jumped back and said, oh, I'm so sorry. You were smiling. So that tells you, Milan. But so what I find wonderful is that people smile at each other here in New York. And when you smile at a person, there's not just a smile back. It's how are you doing? I mean, there's like so much desire for human contact. Then also there are some not so nice situations. But in most cases, I feel that you're never alone.
So you think they can make it here, basically, because...
Oh, yeah. But have they moved here?
No, no.
Oh, just, for a few days?
Yeah,
Geez,
so-
it's going really well. There's no hurricane, there's no snow and no snowfall. Huh? Yeah, exactly. Easy.
So I think is there anybody from the audience who have any questions to Paola? That would be really nice. Come on. She's just here for a couple of hours, then she fly away again.
Oh, stop saying that. I hate people like that.
My question would be, in Denmark, it seems that the school and the designers have a lot of contact with industry, but what about New York? We don't have so much contact with industry.
There's hardly any industry left in New York. I mean, there's craftspeople, and then there's entrepreneurs. There are small pockets of, you can't call them industry, there's entrepreneurs, which is it's a very lively community, but the industry is not here. Sometimes I wonder if it's even in the States. I mean, to be a designer today means finding new avenues to really do your work. You can't look at the 20th century models, they don't work anymore. I mean, how many really big industries are left, and how many designers do they employ? They all act pretty much as Nila was discussing before. They already have their catalog, it sells, and they keep on going that way. If you're a furniture designer today, once upon a time, Capellini was the cathedral. Everybody wanted to get to Capellini. Why? Because Capellini would make 25 prototypes every season, maybe put one in production, and then it went belly up. So, it's really a completely different economic model, but one that is at the same time really interesting because there are so many other ways. Because of the advances in technology and the advances in financing, there are so many other ways to get to do what you really want by investing in yourself. So, forget the industry.
Hi. I was thinking about today's designer can do almost anything. I mean, there isn't a job a designer can possess in a way. You are talking about designers can be, designing business ideas. They have been taking into, the core of companies to shape companies and the ideas because of the innovative ideas and the open-minded know-how of creating ideas and around everything. But what do you think is the most important thing in the future for the designer, the role of the designer in the future? I mean, beyond products, beyond, shaping the next, century.
I've been thinking about this for a while, and I came to a dream situation. I don't know if it'll become true, but I hope that design will become like physics. There's going to be applied design and there's going to be theoretical design. So, empirical, so objects, products, designers really doing interfaces, interactions, systems, and then instead designers thinking philosophically about where we should go, in which direction, which is a little bit what critical design is doing today, a little bit also the transdisciplinary design course here at Parsons. So it's about designers being, on the one hand, great practitioners, still generalists, but great practitioners, able to put together teams that are ad hoc for different situations. And on the other hand, designers that become like public intellectuals. I'm always saying, like in France, when the price of milk changes, you call a philosopher. So I would like for it to happen with designers in the rest of the world. I really do believe that designers, when they have a strong theoretical background, so that's a matter of education, are the best position to think about society and about the future of society. So I hope they will be better used. The lady over here with the cap.
You mentioned riding on the coattails of science. I was wondering if you could shed more light into the future of design and science working together.
Mm-hmm. It's a great future. I mean, a few years ago in 2008, we did at MoMA a show called Design and the Elastic Mind that was all about design and science. And a year and a half before that show, I had the luck to meet Adam Bly, because we mutually admired each other's work, and we just started talking. And I'll tell the story because it's funny. I was in that magazine store at 8th Avenue and Jane or 12th Street, and I saw this magazine called Seed, and I saw that it was a science magazine, but it was well designed, which usually doesn't happen. And it had these articles that were very well written and serious, but 2 pages long, not 15, like Scientific American. But what really won me over were the party pages. There were party pages like Vogue, but instead of having socialites and models, they had, scientists with a martini. And I thought that was lovely. And Adam and I really hit it off because we both had a problem with the stance that our disciplines had in society. He wanted scientists to be considered really engaged in society, so a new way of dealing with the world and science. And I wanted design to be taken more seriously enough with cute chairs. And also we knew that the alliance was very powerful. Design and science have always worked together, but never directly. There's always been technology in the middle as a membrane. But in truth, the theory of design and the elastic mind was that designers are the ones that transform revolutions and innovations into life. So you can invent the microwave, but without designers and engineers, of course, but designer ultimately bringing it with interface and industrial design to the world, it would never become life. The same with the internet and so on and so forth. In the future, already in the present, but more so in the future, I see the collaborations between designers and scientists really continuing. Scientists find in working with designers a degree of freedom that they don't have when they stay within the realm. Of course, whatever experiments they make cannot be considered scientific, so peer review doesn't work there. It's truly experimental and speculative, but it can give hints to the direction of the experimentation. Designers are so happy because they can influence people that will work on those revolutions. So it's a great biofeedback for the future of mankind.
Thank you.
I also think that... Okay, cool. Yeah. No, I just think that science and design in the design center, we're changing the design center completely because it's just been a matter of business. And I think it's so important that we have a research and science into that. And I think if, when I was younger, we had a VHS thing where you put the tape in, and you could actually do something so it could record it. But it never happened because there's all these 4 nils blinking, right? Because you just gave up on it. It was a piece of technology, a piece of science that you didn't understand. And I think with the, going into singularity, there'll be more technology, more data, more, pushing just in front of you. And if designers and scientists and research, if we don't get the act together, we'll get a lot of things that we don't know how to operate, basically. And that means that, we'll just be not here mentally. Yeah.
So sorry, just to speak a little bit more about the educational component, because you keep going back and saying, well, the education matters, and we've talked about how the role of universities, both in both of these cultures, but it strikes me that from the methodology, Neela, that you talked about as being so important, and Paola, what you've seen at the intersection of these kinds of cross-disciplinary partnerships, and what we're doing here at Parsons and at New School, and trying to really rethink the sorts of landscape of education so that the kinds of questions that designers are educated to engage with and the kinds of collaborations and partnerships that they're prepared for. So where are the areas where you're seeing, we have our ideas, what are you seeing as the place where design education has to change in order to make sure that during that time of education, designers are better prepared to play these roles?
I'm so not an expert, Joel, so I'm going to speak very humbly about the way I see it. I see a necessity of a core education that has a lot of theory and also a lot of practice. When I say theory, I find coding also theory in a way. So I think that there should be this basic culture education should give a designer the tools to be able in the future to choose critically what is needed for each project. So I was educated in an architectural school at the Polytechnic of Milan, where you had to be theoretical because we were 15,000 students and there was no way to do anything practical. So, I mean, it's like 15,000 students, only in Milan, only in architecture. So it was ridiculous. But when I came to the States, I realized that, of course, the education system here is fantastic, but there's pros and cons to the jungle of a 15,000 student public school, and instead the rarefied and very expensive atmosphere. The first university that I ever encountered was UCLA, but I was really stunned by the students there because they didn't know how to think by themselves, right? And I think they didn't know what an oral test was. They wanted everything multiple choice. And then they enjoyed it once they got there. No, I know, it's really interesting. So even though I don't know what I'm talking about, I would like to have a little bit of basic philosophy, history, coding, some of the basics, so that people develop, first and foremost, the critical tools to know in which direction they want to go next. Yeah.
That was very good. Oh, no, I don't. It's a long time ago since I was educated, but I can see it, there's some changes that should be made very fast, and one of them is that they are living in their own towers. They should. In Denmark they are even on an island, so we have these art. The royal art is there out there, so they can talk to other ones who are in the same sphere. I think they need to be, together with the Polytechnic. They need to be close with other people, people who are into gene, biology, because I think design is moving in all directions, and that could give you an inspiration that you will maybe not get on an art school. So I think, either the system have to do it or you have to do it as a student. And I think the cool thing in Denmark is that there is no program. The program is very vague when you start. You have to make up your own education.
Kind of nice.
And I think that's why I'm always saying that the methodology and the education we have has still survived all these things where you have to be measured, and all the rest of our system is measuring, right? And that problem is that right now, if you apply for the design school, you have to have a very high grades, A+ or whatever it's called, and the really problem is it's just girls who have A+. All the boys they fainted somewhere in a high school and left. So we have a lot of girls. I think it's 70% on the design schools, and then we have a very creative male organization working around it. And I think, how can we actually be a school, but also connect to the things that happens outside, because I think educational systems are slow, because so how do we find out that it's actually in gene science, or it's we have the Niels Bohr Institute, who's quantum mechanics, and when I talked to them, I realized that the way they were sketching was like a designer. They're thinking like, they have thesis like a designer, they work exactly like a designer. They just wrote some stuff on the wall that I didn't understand anything of, and they didn't understand what I was doing. But I think if we could combine these things, so you did your design education at the fringes of whatever was going on.
I have a question and a comment. First of all, Paola, I hope I didn't make you cry.
Not you, not you, not you. No.
Secondly, just building on a couple of things you said and then Joel said about education. I'm from the Cooper Hewitt, and one of the things that I know the Cooper Hewitt is trying to do in terms of education is really incorporating design into, hopefully in some near future, into a national education system. So I'm curious, even going back further, not just starting in college, but starting in grade school, in first grade or kindergarten. And my question is, in terms of Denmark, I'm not familiar with the education system there, but have you incorporated design into those grades? Because I feel like once it's ingrained into a child, it's only a matter of their becoming more empowered and then demanding that design be a part of our greater life.
We're so lucky that sometimes we have a politician who's saying the buzzwords and they don't know what it is. So they were saying that everybody, when they actually, I think just after we have this kindergarten and you're going to the real school when you're 7 years old. when they start there, they should have innovation and design should be a part of the curriculum. And that just made a shock because no one knew what it was. So they have a little bit of clay and then they do something. And no one was really doing anything until Kike, who's running Index, she just saw there was this enormous gap that there was a law and the teacher didn't know how to do it. So Index have now set up a whole system of how to educate kids from like 7 years old until they leave high school, and they have a teach the teacher system. If you go to their website, Index Award, you can see it. I think it's in dual languages, and they're now selling it in Denmark. They're doing it in Korea, and I think it's so. I think the politicians did something they didn't really realize what was coming, and I think the teachers are really happy because they get a design thinking system going, and we are happy because if people start when they're 7 to find out there's a different way of problem solving, so it's by pure luck. It's not because it was well thought through by any minister.
My question is around, and I don't know the name of the chair, but you pointed at these chairs, and this is for Nile, but it's ultimately going to go to you, Paola. And you said that this is a social chair, and it was a caned chair.
Oh, it was a Wagner chair. When you were showing the Wagner chair.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a Wagner chair. Mm-hmm. So this chair had a lot of labor involved in it, and it's ironic that it's a social chair. And I think the question of the supply chain of these pieces which are produced and so much is offshored. Alex Lee, who is a graduate of Parsons, who's the president of OXO, had lunch with us recently, and we were discussing where things are manufactured. And he was in Denmark and he went to the Lego factory, which, has anyone been in the Lego factory? There are no lights in the Lego factory. You have to go in with a flashlight or turn on the lights because everything is robotic, which makes a lot of sense for a company like Lego. The design and most of the work we talk about through the 50s and before, clearly before, but in the 50s as well and 60s, there was still some question about the worker, about where things are being made. And in a sense, it wasn't such a big question because where things were being designed is where they were being made. We've had a major shift. And I would like to understand a little bit about the contemporary Danish question right now around this topic and in general for industrial design.
I think the young Danish design companies are very aware where they get their product sourced, where it's from, what is going to happen. So a lot of it comes from due to. We pay 55% flat. That's the tax. Right, so that means that if a 1 hour from anybody put into a thing is quite expensive, so they seem they would like to move things outside, so they get things sourced from other parts. But so there's a lot of where is it coming from, and what are we going to do with it afterwards? Are we going to take it back? The packaging, so that is of course a big part of it. But I also see that there's some companies who's doing design with a lot of chrome. And they know they will have a problem. They are fighting daily to find out how can we change the things that have been there for so many years. As you mentioned, the whole light frame system. How can we do that in maybe a different material or in a different way? Because we know the way it's produced right now is not the best, and it will be a sales parameter for your sales in a couple of years.
And the question is really around: are these separate activities? I mean, if you look at beet sugar. They're so integral, and I often find design sees them as separate activities. How do we deal with the production end as opposed to?
No, I don't think so. I think that when you say design, it depends on whether you're talking about the manufacturers or the designers. But I agree with Nile. What Nile was saying. Once upon a time, everything was local. Then there's been a moment where everything was almost or mostly irresponsibly allotted around the world, and now there's really a sense of understanding where production is happening, and it'll take a while to rebalance things. So right now there's a big boost about things that are made in the United States, which I find extremely interesting and very inspiring. I want to take some time to see what the pros and cons are. Will we have to give up something? Will things cost more? Probably yes. I mean, the costing more will be almost, for instance, I was in American Apparel just last night because it's open until late, and I was walking home and I needed a little bit and so I went in, and American Apparel has this mantra that everything is made in downtown LA. Well, the prices are much higher than they are at Uniqlo, so which instead has a different policy. So you have to look at your own moral compass, or use sites like Good Guides. I don't know if you know a site like the Good Guide is a site. It doesn't work for everything, but there's more and more tools to understand the background of products, to understand, well, hopefully the footprints, but that's a little difficult, but at least to understand where things get made. And I remember that in 2004, I did a show that was called Safe, about design and risk. And at that time, there was an MIT student that had done a hypothetical product, a hypothetical thing that was called the ethical fallout detector. So it was like this Geiger counter, and you would go to the supermarket and scan the QR tags, and then it would tell you about the background of the company. Well, now it's kind of reality. So I think it's a mixture of designer sense of responsibility, consumers. I don't even want to call them consumers anymore, but peer pressure and awareness.
I'll do it very fast. I think if you look into Ellen MacArthur Foundation about the circular economy, I think you'll find the future of design, because materials are a lot more scarce than hours and all these things. So that will be a major change.
This is a very exciting discussion. I think we'll take one more last question from the back here, and then we'll make sure we'll wrap it up so we also have time for lunch.
Great, thanks. So we have a question from Chris Beatty, who is watching the live stream. He asks, the nature of design competitions creates a lot of unrealized work. Is this inefficiency, or does it speak to the iterative nature of the design process?
Oh, it's definitely not inefficiency, not compared to architecture. I mean, poor architects for decades do nothing but participate in architectural competitions, so we could discuss it there. But I believe that it's absolutely normal to be slightly inefficient when part of your process is creative. So I think it's absolutely all for the good. I mean, I know of some professional designers that recycle things. You can do that if you want, but no matter what, it all goes into the big minestrone of your development.
And that is a very good, I think, lead on to our next program point, namely lunch. Before we do that, I think we should give a very warm hand to Nille, to Paola. Thank you so much for coming here today and being such good sport. I think you've been providing us with very important interventions here that really are setting the scene for what's going to happen later this afternoon, when we are going to bring our young designers, our rising stars, on to the stage for more debate and more presentations.